I want to move on and ask something very different. Is the royal family worth the money? So anti-monarchy campaigners claim that the firm is costing the taxpayer a whopping £510 million a year. That's nearly 6 times more than the annual sovereign grant, which is basically what the state thinks they cost the public. Now, Buckingham Palace have declined to respond to this claim, but campaign group Republic have said that the current funding is too secretive and they say a scandalous abuse of public money. So, do you agree with this? Is this money well spent, or is it time that we said move out to the monarchy? 0207 862 2222 is the number to give us a ring. Paula, I'll start with you on this one. Is it time for the monarchy to move out?
So, do you know what? I found this story really interesting because obviously there's a cost of living crisis at the moment, Storm. There's a lot of people struggling with their finances. We've heard what's happened in terms of the winter fuel and the tax allowance and that being taken away from a number of our pensioners. So, of course, that pound in our pocket is so important. And then this story breaks. I understand that this figure of 510 million has come from research undertaken by Republic. They are a group who do not support the monarchy. And so immediately you have to take a step back and say, OK, objectively, I need to understand more about this figure and where the research was done, etc. But just in focusing on that question of the monarchy and the cost of the monarchy, I have to be frank with you, Storm. I don't know how much I contribute to the monarchy. I don't know how much of my taxes goes to support them. And whilst there are figures that I have read and I could research on the internet, I don't know how much faith I can place in those figures that I have read. And so that made me think, well, why don't I know? Why, as an adult of the grand old age that I am, do I not understand actually how the monarchy is funded? Why do I not understand actually how much money from my taxes is going to support the monarchy? And I think if anything comes from the Republic doing the research and us challenging the monarchy, asking this question, I think that has to be it, surely. We want clarity, transparency.
When you go onto a council website, there's normally somewhere on the council website that does a breakdown of where all your money's going and what they're spending your money on. I suppose what Paul is asking is, why don't we have one of them for the royal family, and should we?
Well, I think the interesting point about this, and where we probably agree, is that I think transparency is really important. What we also have to recognise, though, is that I think that there has been some cooking of the books in respect to some of these numbers that they've come up with. However, things like security, say, for example, if we didn't have a royal family, we'd have some other form of head of state. So should we know how much is spent on security? And increasingly, whoever is in charge of a country, I mean, look at the amount of security that the US has to have. I mean, it just dwarfs anything that we would spend. So whoever you have as a head of state, go to France, you know, you have the Elysee Palace, you know, you'll have the flunkies, you'll have the staff, you'll have the things. So I think some of this number is a bit cooked up in the sense that a country will have a certain amount of expenditure. But what's important here is I think we should have more transparency, but you are never going to know what your tax money is spent on, because it becomes an individual bill, depending on how much tax you spent, where you spent it on, and then also how the various different vignettes of tax. So if, for example, you're, I don't know, a bit of a boozer, you know, all that sort of money is apparently supposed to be siphoned off towards health and sorting you out if your boozing goes wrong. Or, you know, if you're a smoker, which I'm not, by the way, but if you're a smoker, you know, £11 out of the 12 or however many it costs, or I think it's 14 now for a box of fags, you know, that will go to health service apparently. So I think it is important to have transparency, but we've also got to be aware of the history and the amount of money. £1.76 billion directly every year is what the monarchy generates for the UK. Okay. That institution is probably worth £70 billion to the nation.
That number in itself, I don't know where they get that number from or how they calculate it. It's a number I've heard before, but I would question that too later. But let's first speak to Graham Smith, who is an anti-monarchy campaigner from Republic. And you've been involved in this campaign and actually these figures, I suppose. Were you shocked to find out the numbers?
No, not at all. And I think our estimate is conservative. I mean, it is a very expensive institution, always has been. And we saw this 15 years ago with MPs' expenses. We're now having a similar row at the moment about the way MPs take gifts and all the rest of it. You know, people do these things because they think no one's watching and no one cares. The royal family is very, very secretive, isn't transparent, isn't clear about what it spends its money on. and is quite frankly dishonest, because a large part of that cost is to do with the Duchy of Cornwall and the Duchy of Lancaster, which they claim are private estates. They're actually very clearly, the historical and legal record is very clear, that they are state assets. So we have chosen as a nation to allow them to take those incomes of £23 million a year for William, £23 million a year for Charles, private income from state assets, plus the security. And I heard the comments before. No one's talking about a French or US style system. So we're talking about comparing it to the Irish president, comparing it to the Icelandic president or the German president. I mean, the Irish president costs the taxpayer, excluding security, £5 million a year, just 5 million. And some of that is given out as gifts to people who turn 100. So that's sort of figure that we should be aiming for, not £500 million a year.
Okay, I'm wondering, when you say that the royal family are really secretive and we don't really know how much it's costing the taxpayer, well, then where are you getting your information from? How have you come up with these numbers?
Well, we're getting it from a variety of sources, historical sources, and some of it is estimates, some of it is newspaper reports where people have spoken to sources within the Metropolitan Police, for example, about security. And we're quite clear in the report that this is an estimate. It shouldn't be down to an organisation like the public to make these estimates. It should be all very clear. So, for example, when the royals do their engagements around the country, if they visit Cambridge or Lincoln or wherever, those local councils will be faced with large costs. So we've done freedom of information requests. We can't possibly do it to every council for every visit.
Oh, Graham, I think we'll try and sort out your line there, but just some of the figures that you have included in this is 150 million estimated for security, which does sound like a lot, but we do want our royal family to be secure, I suppose. 96 million for so-called lost income. Now, that's the one that caught me, because you're basically adding in times where the royal family could have used the royal residences and didn't. Is that a fair number to add into that total cost?
Yeah, well, it's not what the royal family could use it for, it's what the state who owns those buildings could draw from those buildings as income. The calculations are included in the report. So it's not a simple, we could rent them for, all the time at full price. It's a calculation which is based on the sorts of calculations made for other assets owned by other parts of the state. And it's the cost that we would recover if the royals weren't having exclusive use of all those buildings. They have about 24 homes between them. Now, we don't owe any of them anything other than the head of state. And that's the point. If we had one head of state, that's all we would need.
This is essentially the argument that if we use Buckingham Palace for a wedding venue, they would make more money. But listen, Graham Smith, your line is a bit dodgy, but thank you very much for speaking to us and clearing up some of those figures and where they came from. I think now we can go back to the phone lines and speak to Deanna from East Sussex first. Do you think the royal family are worth the money?
I think they're worth every single penny. I think they're wonderful, and it's something, one of the very few things in the British Isles at the moment that we should all be proud of, and that to moan about them and what they cost. There's so much money being thrown around that we don't know why, where, or what is happening.
Dina,
I'm not. Yes, sorry.
No. Please, I like somebody that's passionate and calls up. But you say that you're proud of them, that we should all be proud of them. With the adultery, with the infighting, with the things that we hear about the royal family now, they're not.
What adultery?
Well, Charles and Camilla, for one.
Oh, come on. Those two were in love donkeys years ago.
Deanna, I don't for 1 minute deny any of that. But if you are going to be the head of the Church of England, a religion that doesn't believe in divorce, and then you have to get a divorce because of adultery, is that shining a very good light on yourself?
Well, I think that's nonsense. I don't think people look at that. Well, how do you explain that crowds, and I mean, Channel 5, I watch it a lot because I call it the Royal Channel, because on the Saturday, the weekend is so much about the royal family. I soak it up like a sponge. Okay, I'm in my 80s, and people of my age love it. It's not just, what's the word? It's not just sort of because it's a long time ago and this, that and the other, these things happen, but times are changing now, and the royal family do their very best to stay in line and to do right things, and there are lots and lots of people that I think will probably blow them all up if they had a chance, but I think it's treasonable, I really do. I say that half jokingly, but half not, because what harm are they doing? There's so much money, don't say it's the money, for God's sake, because sorry, I shouldn't have said that, there is so much, there's the king on now. Yeah. He heard me.
I can see.
I mean, they've been through so much. He's had cancer, and I mean that beautiful woman, the Princess of Wales. She is so gorgeous, and she's breezed through that. I mean, she really doesn't look very well, but hopefully there she is. She's lovely. It's such a lovely family. I don't know how people can have the gall to say that they're not worth the money. They are the very, very best thing that we've got in this country.
Your sparkle alone when speaking about the royal family makes me think that they're probably worth the 500 million or whatever they're being accused of costing. I can hear your passion through the phone. Thank you so much for your call. Wendy from Hampshire, what's your view on the royal family? Do they need to move out, or are they worth every penny?
Hello, Storm, and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
First of all, no, they're worth every penny. I used to work in publicity and worked for an American company, amongst others, who brought tourists into Britain solely because of our history and pageantry and the royal family. And if we took that away, I can assure you the country would suffer financially.
I mean,
not only that, Storm.
The reason I would question that is when you look at France, they don't have a royal family, but they have the Palace of Versailles. And actually, I haven't been to visit it, but most people when they go to Paris or they go to France will go to visit at some point. It brings in a lot of money even without having the royal family there, because whether we like it or not, if our royal family disappeared tomorrow, it's still part of our history. We still have the palaces, we still have the castles, we still have all the other stuff that goes along with it, and that's the things that people want to go see.
But wouldn't you agree, though, that there's something about the fact that the family is still there and is still alive that makes it more exciting and more vibrant? Because if you go to some of these places and you look at the history, and I agree with Wendy, actually, I think it's a combination of, you know, the fact that they are living people, and also that there is this intrigue. I know that people talk about their own personal conduct, but that's what The Crown was about. It's about the conflict between the personal and their fallibilities, if you like, and the institution, which is supposed to be blameless. And it's fascinating to us all, and we love it.
And yes, but that's actually where I think maybe their downfall for the younger generation might be happening, because for older generation, they were held to a higher esteem. They were supposed to be above it all. They were sort of regal and godly and all of these sorts of things.
The new family have to account for the fact that they are going to be more watched and there's going to be more information about them. And I think Harry has learnt to his detriment, and frankly, with not one but two rather excoriating documentaries, you know, about their downfall, Andrew probably has misgivings about it too. And look, all of that stuff, I think, does dent the monarchy and its popularity, and they're going to have to work harder to make sure, particularly, as you're right, with the younger generation, because they're not going to be as enraptured as perhaps us older folks are.
Or as forgiving, potentially. Wendy, thank you so much for your call. Bridget from Somerset, how do you feel about the royal family?
I'm 100% royalist.
Oh, okay.
We do not have to pay for a president.
Okay, but we already,
our country.
Bridget, we already pay for a prime minister, so just change his name. We'd pay the same amount in security. He doesn't become any more at risk because he's president rather than prime minister, does he?
Well, I'm a historian. They have all the history behind them. Presidents and members of parliament come and go all the time. And people have to vote for them.
Yeah,
the Queen
exactly.
And her
They're democratic.
Family, the royal family are 100% British.
Well, you ended that interestingly there, Bridget.
Hang on, Bridget. Wasn't there quite an interesting German/Greek part of the royal family?
So what?
No,
Okay, but
they were 100% British.
Your argument was we need to have a
They
royal
are.
family because they're 100% British, whereas a prime minister may not be, and that was clearly something that you, or a president may not be, and that's clearly something that you would vote against, Bridget. And we're just saying that perhaps 100% British may not be completely accurate when the royal family is concerned. But thank you very much for your call. Clearly a royalist. You know, it's so interesting. There's so many people calling up in huge support of the royal family, and yet when you read the stats, it's not always the same. We did put this on X, on Twitter, whatever way you want to call it now. Is the royal family worth the money? And the results are in. So 25% of you said yes, just 25%. The majority, 75% of you said no, they're not worth it at all. Well, where were you on the phones today?
I wonder whether that's a generational thing, and we have seen there, like those who would access social media to have their voice heard, as opposed to those who would naturally reach for the home landline and to have their voice heard. And so it's quite interesting hearing the voices online today, because it is that kind of comment, that kind of like, I don't care how much they cost. I don't even want to question how much they cost, and I don't want to hear you challenge how much they cost.
Because I assume you would want to know. Because I would want to know. Yeah, I think we both want to know.
And that isn't a bad thing to want to know. And that's what would intrigue me about Bridget, for example. Why is it a bad thing to want to know? Because I can't answer your question, is the royal family worth it? Because
you don't know how much you're spending on it.
I don't know.
I suppose the difficulty then for them is because they're having difficulty because there's too many people know too many things about them, and so we're sort of losing face on that. If we start to find out how much their suits are, how much they spend on dinner, how much their tea costs every year, we'll start to think, well, they've got nothing in common to us, but isn't that what the royal family is about?
I think there is an element of what we need to know and what we want to know. We want to know all sorts of things, as demonstrated. You know, put a documentary out there that delves in, a newspaper article that spills the beans and the whatever, and we want to know. But should we know? And I think also when it comes to some of the puff figures about numbers of alternate uses and assets and things, things like Buckingham Palace, they are held in trust for the nation. So it's not as if they have access to that; they use it. But you have to remember that that's a working palace. There are 100 people, or however many, or probably more, who work in there and do all the workings, if you like, of the royal
only recently do
entity.
we, the commoners, have access to that. And it's this kind of thing, I think, that the younger generation just have no understanding.
I mean, what they charge for an ice cream at the Buckingham Palace is, that is criminal. I mean, I'm sure that they should review their prices there, or a cup of tea at Sandringham. Blimey, it's absolutely rinsed.
I have to say, I took my children along to the coronation for King Charles because I thought it was really important for them to be part of that history. And I was shocked at the amount of Republican protesters there.
Wow.
I was really shocked at that, which really worries me for the monarchy, because if I didn't take my 3 children there to be a part of that, I just wonder where they would have learnt about that momentous occasion. And would I have had to rely on TikTok to teach them? And that is a big concern.
Well, we rely on TikTok to teach us a lot nowadays. All right, we'll have to leave the royal family behind and move on.